"He's still alive!" the little girl exclaimed, about to open the closed casket at the millionaire's son's wake. Then something incredible happens. Comment and rate my story from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important. And subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The most anticipated wake in the big city was taking place in the main hall of the mansion, where white flowers decorated every corner, and a heavy silence dominated the atmosphere. Guests dressed in black whispered condolences as they observed the small golden casket in the center of the room. The 30-year-old widowed millionaire remained motionless beside the coffin, his green eyes lost in some distant point, as if refusing to accept the reality before him. His fortune, accumulated through shrewd investments on Wall Street, seemed insignificant at that moment. All the money in the world couldn't bring back that life that had been taken so soon. The estate built over the years, the multi-million-dollar profits, the dividends that arrived monthly, none of it mattered when it came to the most devastating loss a father could face. The millionaire's second wife circulated among the guests with rehearsed tears, receiving hugs and words of consolation. Her eyes, however, shone with something other than sadness, a subtle satisfaction that only the most attentive observers could perceive. She knew that she would now be the sole beneficiary of all that wealth, the assets, the possessions that made up her husband's vast financial empire. It was then that a small and fragile figure burst into the main hall, the 4-year-old street urchin, who appeared to be only 2 due to her extreme thinness, ran towards the casket with desperation in her eyes. Her bare feet echoed on the cold marble as she shouted words that made everyone present turn around in shock. "He's still breathing. The boy is still breathing." The child's high-pitched voice cut through the silence like a blade, causing the guests to recoil instinctively. Her torn and dirty clothes contrasted with the elegance of the environment, and her disheveled hair framed a face marked by hunger and neglect. The millionaire raised his eyes for the first time in hours, focusing on the little intruder. His first impulse was to ignore her, considering her just a child, disturbed by the events. After all, beggars frequently approached his property, attracted by the obvious wealth that emanated from every detail of the mansion. But something in the girl's desperate determination made him hesitate. There was a certainty in her voice, a conviction that seemed to go beyond the understanding of such a young child. She didn't show the fear or confusion typical of someone her age in the face of the situation. "Get that child out of here immediately," ordered the stepmother in a cutting voice, gesturing to the security guards. "She's disturbing a sacred moment." The elderly housekeeper, who had taken care of the boy since birth, watched the scene with growing curiosity. She knew children well after decades of experience, and something in the little street urchin's behavior caught her attention. It wasn't hysteria or confusion, it was pure determination. The girl had been found 3 days before, wandering through the mansion gardens, whispering strange words about the boy who sleeps but hasn't left. Since then, she had developed an inexplicable obsession with the grieving family, repeatedly appearing at the gates of the property. During her years abandoned on the streets of the big city, the child had developed a keen sensitivity that helped her survive. She had learned to distinguish between the deep sleep of the homeless during the intense cold and more serious situations that required immediate help. This ability had saved several lives over time. Now, in front of the golden casket, her instincts screamed that something was deeply wrong. The boy inside the coffin didn't present the signs she knew so well. The stiffness wasn't present, the skin coloration seemed strange, and there was something else, a subtle energy that only her trained sensitivity could detect. "Please, just look closely," the girl pleaded, trying to get closer to the casket as the security guards surrounded her. "He's not like the others. I know when someone has really left." The millionaire watched the little figure fighting against men much larger than her, driven by an unwavering conviction. Her words echoed in his mind. awakening doubts he had tried to suppress since the inexplicable accident that had taken the life of his only heir. The stepmother intensified her efforts to silence the girl, spreading whispers among the guests about the child's mental instability. "She's just a disturbed beggar," she repeated to anyone who would listen. "Probably traumatized by experiences on the streets." But the property's gardener, a simple man who had always treated the girl kindly when she appeared in the gardens, watched everything with growing unease. He had noticed strange behaviors from the stepmother in the days leading up to the accident, whispered conversations on the phone, and visits from unknown people. As the security guards finally managed to remove the girl from the hall, she shouted one last time, "3 days. He has 3 days before it's too late." Her words hung in the heavy air of the wake, planting seeds of doubt that would grow in the coming hours. The millionaire felt a chill run down his spine, as if something fundamental had just changed in his understanding of recent events. The housekeeper exchanged meaningful glances with the gardener, both sharing the same feeling that they had just witnessed something very important. The truth about the accident that had cost the boy his life was about to be questioned by a completely unexpected source. The following dawn brought a restlessness that spread through the mansion like a dense fog. The millionaire couldn't sleep, tormented by the words of the street urchin that echoed incessantly in his mind. He walked through the empty hallways, his steps muffled by the Persian rug that had cost more than many houses in the city. His investments in cryptocurrencies and financial applications had generated extraordinary returns in recent years, but all this wealth now seemed like a heavy burden on his shoulders. What good was being a multi-millionaire if he couldn't protect what he loved most? The impressive net worth, the assets spread across several countries, none of it brought consolation when faced with the possibility of having failed as a father. In the kitchen, he found the elderly housekeeper preparing tea, her red eyes betraying an equally sleepless night. The woman who had raised the boy since he was a baby carried a deep pain, but also something else, a growing suspicion that she could no longer ignore. "Sir, I need to tell you something that has been troubling me for days," she said in a trembling voice, pouring the tea into fine china cups. "On the day of the accident, I noticed strange behaviors from your wife, madam." The millionaire raised his eyes, his attention completely focused on the housekeeper's words. During the 3 days since the tragedy, he had taken refuge in a fog of denial and pain, avoiding questioning the details of what had happened. She was nervous, more agitated than normal, the housekeeper continued, choosing her words carefully. And there was a small bottle in her purse, something I've never seen before. When I asked about the medicine, she said they were vitamins for the little master. The words hit the millionaire like a punch to the gut. Fragments of memories began to rearrange themselves in his mind. Conversations abruptly interrupted when he entered the room, whispered phone calls during the early hours of the morning, subtle changes in his wife's behavior in the weeks before. Meanwhile, on the other side of the property, the street urchin had found shelter in the gardener's shed. The simple and kind man had allowed her to stay there, touched by the child's unwavering determination to help a family she barely knew. "Do you really believe that the boy is still alive?" asked the gardener, offering the girl a piece of bread and warm milk. The girl's big eyes shone with absolute conviction. "On the streets, I learned to recognize when someone has really left. The boy doesn't have the right smell, the right color. He's sleeping very deeply, but his heart is still beating slowly." Her words carried a wisdom that transcended her age. Years of abandonment had forced the child to develop survival instincts that included the ability to detect minimal vital signs. During harsh winters, this ability meant the difference between saving a life or finding a frozen body. Back at the main mansion, the stepmother had woken up early and noticed her husband's absence. She found him in the kitchen, talking intensely with the housekeeper, and a wave of panic ran through her body. She had worked meticulously for months to execute her plan, and now she felt the foundations of her strategy beginning to crumble. "Honey, you should be resting," she said, forcing a worried smile. "The funeral is this afternoon, and you need to be strong to face this difficult moment." The millionaire studied his wife's face with new intensity. Details that had previously gone unnoticed now seemed loaded with meaning. The excessive haste to schedule the funeral, the insistence that there be no additional medical examinations, the way she avoided being alone with the boy's body. "Maybe we should postpone the funeral," he said slowly, watching her reaction. "I'm still processing all of this." The flash of panic that crossed the stepmother's eyes was almost imperceptible, but he managed to capture it. "No, honey. Prolonging this will only increase your suffering. The family doctor was very clear about the circumstances." At that moment, the gardener knocked on the kitchen door, carrying the street urchin by the hand. The child had insisted on returning to the mansion, driven by an urgency that grew with each passing hour. "Sir, the little one has something important to say," announced the gardener, ignoring the furious look the stepmother gave him. The girl let go of the man's hand and ran to the millionaire, her small eyes shining with fierce determination. "Time is running out. If we don't do something today, it will be too late to save him." "This is absurd," the stepmother exploded, her mask of sadness finally slipping. "How can you listen to the delusions of a street child? This is disrespectful to the memory of my stepson." But the millionaire had made a decision. Something in the combination of the housekeeper's suspicions, the gardener's observations, and the girl's unwavering conviction formed a picture he could no longer ignore. His son had been the most important thing in his life, more valuable than all his businesses and investments combined. "I'm going to request a second medical opinion," he declared, his voice loaded with authority. "If there is any possibility, however small, I need to investigate." The housekeeper nodded with relief, while the gardener squeezed the girl's shoulder in support. But the stepmother knew that her window of opportunity was closing quickly. She had carefully calculated the time it would take for the effects of the substance to become irreversible. "You're making a terrible mistake," she whispered, but her voice trembled with an emotion that wasn't sadness. "Some things are best left alone." The girl looked directly at the stepmother with an intensity disturbing for someone so young. "You know he didn't really die," she said in a clear and firm voice. "I can feel it." The silence that followed was tense and loaded with implications. The millionaire watched his wife turn visibly pale, her hands trembling slightly as she clung to the kitchen counter. The truth was there, hanging in the air like a sword about to fall. There were only a few hours left until the scheduled funeral, and each passing minute increased the pressure on everyone involved. The street urchin had triggered a chain of events that would change everything, but it remained to be seen if it would be in time to save a life hanging by an invisible thread. The specialist doctor arrived at the mansion 2 hours before the scheduled time for the funeral, bringing with him equipment that the millionaire had urgently requested. Dr. Enrique was known for his expertise in rare cases of poisoning and deep comatose states, and his reputation was worth every penny of the exorbitant fees he charged. The stepmother had tried to prevent the specialist's arrival, claiming it would be too traumatic for her husband. Her objections, however, sounded too desperate, arousing even more suspicion. The millionaire noticed how she avoided looking directly at the casket while the doctor prepared his instruments. "I need to examine the body immediately," declared Dr. Henrique, adjusting his glasses as he observed the boy through the glass of the coffin. "If the child is right about the vital signs, every minute counts." The street urchin remained next to the millionaire, her small hand holding his firmly. His investments in gold and diversified applications had provided him with enough financial security to seek the best medical opinions in the country. But now he realized that all his wealth would be useless if he lost the chance to save his son. When the coffin was opened, a heavy silence took over the room. The doctor leaned over the small body, his experienced fingers searching for signs that other professionals might have missed. The housekeeper held a rosary between her trembling hands, whispering silent prayers. "Interesting," murmured Dr. Henrique after a few minutes of careful examination. "The body temperature is slightly higher than would be expected for this amount of exposure, and the rigor mortis—" He paused, frowning. "Practically non-existent." The stepmother took a step back, her face turning visibly pale. "That doesn't mean anything," she protested in a high-pitched voice. "Everybody reacts differently." But the specialist was already connecting his monitoring equipment, sophisticated devices that could detect minimal cardiac activity. The rhythmic and almost imperceptible sound that emerged from the speakers made everyone freeze in place. "There is cardiac activity," announced Dr. Henrique, his voice charged with professional urgency. "Extremely low, but present. This child is not dead. He is in a state of deep, suspended animation." The millionaire felt his legs weaken. The street urchin had been right all along. His millions in stocks and investment funds seemed insignificant in the face of the magnitude of what he had just discovered. His son was alive, fighting against something that had been deliberately administered to him. "How is this possible?" he asked, his voice hoarse with emotion. "There are rare substances that can induce this state," explained the doctor, working quickly to stabilize the boy's vital signs. "Compounds derived from specific plants, usually used in ancient rituals or in sophisticated poisoning attempts." The word poisoning fell like a bomb in the room. All eyes turned to the stepmother, who had retreated to the wall, her hands trembling uncontrollably. The mask of the grieving widow had finally fallen, revealing an expression of absolute panic. "You're all crazy," she stammered. "This is impossible." The family doctor confirmed the cause of death. The housekeeper stepped forward, her courage strengthened by the confirmation of her suspicions. "I saw the vials in your purse, madam, and I remember perfectly the strange behavior of Dr. Silva when he examined the boy. He seemed nervous, too rushed." The gardener, who had remained silent until then, found his voice to speak. "In recent months I've noticed strange conversations between you and visitors who came during the early hours of the morning, always when the boss was traveling on business. The evidence accumulated like pieces of a macabre puzzle." The millionaire felt a growing fury burning in his chest, mixed with desperate relief at the discovery that his son was still breathing. His astronomical profits and million-dollar dividends had never meant as much as those faint heartbeats echoing through the speakers. "We need to transfer him to the hospital immediately," said Dr. Henrique, preparing a specialized stretcher. "The antidote exists, but the time of administration is crucial. The more time that passes, the lower the chances of complete recovery." The street urchin smiled for the first time since arriving at the mansion, her suspicions finally validated. On the streets, she had learned to trust her instincts, and that intuition had just saved a precious life. The millionaire looked at her with deep gratitude, recognizing that he owed his son's life to a child that society had abandoned. "I'm not going to let you take my son anywhere," declared the stepmother suddenly, her voice taking on a dangerous tone. "You have no proof of anything. It's just speculation based on the ravings of a beggar." But her desperate resistance only confirmed what everyone already knew. The millionaire approached her slowly, his green eyes shining with an intensity she had never seen before. All the power of his fortune, built through shrewd business deals and successful investments, was now focused on protecting his son and seeking justice. "You almost killed my son," he said in a low, controlled voice. "That explained why you insisted so much on speeding up the funeral, why you avoided additional examinations, why you tried to silence any questioning." The stepmother tried to deny it once more, but Dr. Henrique interrupted with a discovery that would change everything. "I found traces of a specific substance in his system. It's an extremely rare compound, traditionally used to simulate death. It can only be obtained through very specific contacts." The walls seemed to close in around the woman who had spent months meticulously planning the elimination of the only obstacle between her and a multi-million-dollar inheritance. Her assets, her investments, all the wealth she had coveted was now out of reach, and worse, her crime had been discovered. The boy was carefully transferred to the stretcher, his vital signs being monitored every second. The street urchin held the millionaire's hand as they watched the ambulance leave, knowing that she had done the right thing by insisting on her suspicions. But as the mansion gates closed behind them, everyone knew that the real battle was just beginning. The race against time to completely reverse the effects of the poison would be decisive for the boy's future, and the coming days would reveal whether the intervention had been done in time. 6 months later, the mansion had been completely transformed. The corridors that once echoed only with silence now resonated with children's laughter and animated conversations. The millionaire watched from his office window as 2 children played in the garden, his son now recovered, and the street urchin who had saved his life. Recovery had been long and challenging. For weeks, the boy remained in an induced coma, while doctors worked to reverse the effects of the substance that had almost cost him his life. The millionaire had used a considerable portion of his capital to bring in the best specialists in the world, spending resources that he would normally allocate to new investments in Bitcoin and other financial applications. The girl, who now went by Little Hero as they affectionately called her, had officially become part of the family. The adoption process had proceeded smoothly, facilitated by the millionaire's eternal gratitude and the unanimous support of everyone who knew the story. His assets and properties now included specific provisions to guarantee the future of both children. "Daddy, come play with us!" shouted the boy from the garden, waving energetically. His physical recovery had been almost complete, but the emotional scars still manifested occasionally in nightmares and moments of anxiety when he was left alone for too long. The millionaire smiled, putting away the financial reports he was reviewing. His businesses continued to thrive. The dividends arrived regularly, his stock market shares maintained excellent performance, and his net worth had grown substantially during the last few months. But now, for the first time in years, money was not his top priority. The elderly housekeeper had taken on an even more important role in the house, caring for both children with maternal dedication. She had been instrumental during the girl's adaptation period, helping her overcome traumas from years living on the streets and developing confidence in a safe environment. "The children are asking you to tell the story again," she said, entering the office with a warm smile. The story of how the little hero saved the day. It was a tradition that had developed naturally. Every night, before bed, the children asked to hear the version of the story told by the millionaire himself. Not the traumatic and frightening version of the real events, but an adaptation where courage, intuition, and family love triumphed over evil. Going down to the garden, the millionaire found the 2 children sitting under the big tree where they used to play. The girl had gained healthy weight, and her eyes shone with a light that hadn't existed when she arrived at the mansion. She still showed signs of her difficult past, waking up early, hiding food, and sometimes becoming apprehensive with loud noises. But she was gradually learning to trust in the safety of her new home. "Tell about when I discovered that my brother was sleeping too deeply," she asked, using the language they had developed to explain the events in a way appropriate for children. The boy nodded enthusiastically, although his own memories of the period were vague and fragmented. The doctors had assured them that this was normal and probably beneficial for his psychological recovery. "Once upon a time, there was a very brave girl who had a special talent," began the millionaire, sitting on the grass next to them. "She could perceive things that other people couldn't, and one day this special ability led her to save someone very important." As he told the story, the millionaire reflected on the profound changes in his own life. Before the traumatic experience, he had been a workaholic, measuring success only through numbers in bank accounts and profitability reports. His investments in gold and various funds had provided financial security, but he had lost sight of what really mattered. The girl had taught him that true wealth was not in the euros accumulated or in the compound interest, but in the ability to protect and love those who depended on him. His most valuable inheritance would not be measured in dollars, but in the legacy of values he would leave for the children. And then, he continued, the family realized that the brave girl wasn't just a visitor. She was part of the family who had been lost and finally found her way home. The girl's eyes filled with tears of happiness. For the first time in her life, she experienced what it meant to truly belong somewhere. She was no longer the abandoned child who wandered the streets in search of survival. She was a daughter, a sister, part of something bigger than herself. The gardener approached the group, carrying a tray with snacks prepared by the housekeeper. He had also become an important father figure for the children, teaching them about plants, nature, and the value of honest work. His simplicity and natural kindness provided a valuable counterpoint to the material wealth that surrounded the family. "Sir," he said respectfully, "a letter has arrived from the lawyer about the case." The millionaire nodded, knowing that he was referring to the legal proceedings involving his ex-wife. The woman had fully confessed after being confronted with irrefutable evidence, revealing a conspiracy involving the family doctor and a supplier of illegal substances. The legal process was coming to an end, but the emotional implications would continue for a long time. "Daddy sad?" asked the boy, noticing the subtle change in his father's expression. "No, my son," replied the millionaire, hugging both children. "I'm thinking about how lucky we are to all be together and safe." It was true. Despite all the trauma and suffering they had gone through, the family had emerged stronger and more united. The millionaire had learned to balance his business responsibilities with active fatherhood, discovering simple joys that his money had never provided. He had also established a special fund dedicated to helping children in situations of abandonment, inspired by his adopted daughter's story. It wasn't about traditional charity, but about a comprehensive program that offered education, medical care, and development opportunities for vulnerable young people. When night came and the children went to bed, the millionaire remained in the garden for a few minutes, contemplating the stars. His fortune continued to grow, his businesses thrived, but now all of it had a greater purpose. He was no longer just a rich man. He was a father, protector, and example for two children who depended on him. The little hero had saved more than one life on that fateful day at the wake. She had saved an entire family, bringing lost souls together and creating something beautiful from tragedy. True wealth, he finally realized, was in the love they shared and the hope they built together for the future. If you liked this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment on what you thought of my story, giving it a rating from 0 to 10. And thank you very much.